Hey everyone, Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club, and I just decided to come to you live here from one of my favorite and really loud spots here in downtown Boise. I'm in between some client meetings and have a few minutes to enjoy a nice spring day here in downtown Boise, and I'm in one of my new favorite places. This is the Cherie Buckner Webb Park. Cherie Buckner Webb was a guest on our Unlocking the Club podcast in July. So if you haven't had a chance to, definitely take a listen to that podcast. But Cherie is a icon here in Idaho, legend, and someone who has been so influential and impactful in my life and in my journey. She was one of the first Black people to be a member of the Idaho state legislature. She started out in the House of Representatives and then went on to be in the Senate for several years and is so respected in this community because of who she is and how she shows up, the work that she does, her passion for this community. Her family has been part of the Boise community for generations, and she continues to serve in so many different ways outside of her role in the legislature. So, whenever I have a chance and I have a moment here in downtown Boise, I do try to come over to the Cherie Buckner Webb Park that was dedicated to Cherie a couple years ago, right inside of the COVID years, and she was named as one of the candidates to have the park named after her by a community vote, which is pretty impressive. So there are so many people that wanted to see her recognized for all the things that she's done in this community. So that's been pretty cool. But I wanted to come to you live today for a couple different reasons. I had a really interesting kind of aha moment this weekend about procrastination. I had been procrastinating a number of things over the last few months. And one of those was actually getting outside into my garden, which is called Alice Faye's Garden, and getting it ready for this season. Last year I got an early start on it. I planted some seeds indoors in late February and early March, and then was transplanting them in late April and planting seeds in the garden in April and transplanting some other seedlings in May. But I got a late start this year and was procrastinating for some reason. And it reminded me of some legendary days of procrastination that I had back in college with one of my teammates on the Stanford women's basketball team and a roommate, Molly Goodenbauer. We used to joke all the time that our apartment was at its cleanest when we were either in midterm week or finals week, because we found a way to procrastinate and do anything and everything beside actually studying for the upcoming quizzes, tests, midterm exams, or write the papers that we had. And the way that we found ourselves consistently procrastinating was actually rolling up our sleeves and cleaning our apartment until it was meticulously clean. And we just would joke about it because we knew that when our rooms were clean or when the apartment was clean, it was probably because we were procrastinating something. Well, that was certainly the case. That's been going on with me for several months. I'd had a couple things that had just been sitting by the side that I hadn't necessarily gotten to, whether it was emails or my garden. And I had this aha moment when I finally actually decided to get to it. And one day I looked out the window in the garden and I saw my collard greens starting to grow. And I saw a couple of leaves on the stem of the collard greens from last year. And I wasn't sure first if the collard greens were going to grow back and if I would have any fresh collards this year or if I had to plant some new ones. And I apologize for the noise in the background. It sounds like they are getting some mechanical equipment out in the background at the favorite part of the park, this cool swing. But anyway, I looked out the window one morning and I saw these beautiful green flowers, if you will, on in the raised bed that has my collard greens. And all of a sudden, I got excited, and I realized that sign of life, something new, something fresh, is something that really always resonates with me, and that is something that inspires me. But yet, and still, I looked around and I saw a bunch of weeds that were in the garden, and gosh, I just wasn't ready to get out in the garden and clear those weeds. Um, but this past weekend, I finally found the time to do so. Went to the store, got a bunch of new topsoil to level out my raised beds, got some new seeds, started to plant the garden, and then actually started to roll up my sleeves and start to pull some weeds. So I knew I was going to do two things. I was either going to pull the weeds or I was going to find some sort of spray to kill the weeds. But I didn't want a spray that would affect my vegetable gardens, and I wasn't quite sure, even though there's a bunch of organic products on the market. So I decided that I wanted to focus on trying to pull as many of these weeds on the front, sides, and backyard as possible. And as I was pulling the weeds, I actually started to get into it. And I found that when I would pull a weed and take my time and really try to get a firm grip on the base of the weed that was closest to the ground, and take my time in yanking that out. And when I pulled the full root of the weed out, there was a sense of joy, of fulfillment, of achievement that I felt. And then there would be times I would try to rush through it and maybe just grab the top of the weed, or I didn't have a good grip on it, or perhaps the weed wasn't as fully grown as others, and I didn't have enough material to grab and get a firm grasp. And those I was not able to get the root. It was disappointing, and I was just figuring out it was just going to go back bigger and stronger a week or two later. But I found myself just going throughout the garden and pulling these weeds, and I had this really strange sense of achievement, joy, accomplishment as I was pulling weeds, and I started to see the garden start to look much better to my eyes. And I thought for a moment that that is actually the story of my procrastination and many other things, is when I actually just focus on the surface of something and either address that issue and move on, and don't get to the root of the issue. First, that thing lingers on. But when I do spend the time to actually focus on what is at the core of this challenge issue that is standing in my way of getting it done, then when I actually focus on that and address it, notice what's going on, answer those questions that I may have deep down, it feels so good to then get rid of it. And that was at the core of my procrastination in the garden. Was it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be as easy this year to start my garden. Last year it was starting fresh. I had all new materials, all new area that I'd cleared out. And this year I was going to have to clean it up from last year. I was going to have to figure out what plants I was going to replant, what plants were coming back. It was going to be much more challenging. And that actually was also the same issue that I was having with some things that were going on in my personal and professional life as well, that I hadn't got to the root of the issue. And once I actually took the time to sit down and face whatever was happening with me, and actually start to dig out the weed. It may not look good, it may not be what I thought it was, but it felt better to actually address what was going on, that core hurt that may be going on, or that uncertainty, or that frustration, or that grief, to be honest, that was preventing me from actually showing up the way that I wanted to show up. And so it's a really crazy analogy. I've been using it in a lot of different conversations I'm having. Um, but I'm also going to start to pay more attention to my efforts to just deal with the surface of an issue, or actually take the time to delve further beneath the surface and get to the root of the issue. And therefore, that may have a little bit more longevity. I will say that, after a while, for those smaller weeds that I found. It was much more difficult to get a grasp, and so I did go to the organic spray to try to spray those weeds. And so I went around the garden, spent probably about 45 minutes spraying those weeds, and didn't have that same instant gratification that I had from being able to rip up the full weed with my hands. And I'm not sure what the results are actually going to be if we do get not just the weed that you can see above ground, but if that spray is actually going to get to the root of the weed, and we'll have to see. And I think that that is another analogy for happens. Sometimes we use external sources or forces to help us address something that is causing friction or stress or overwhelm. And you may not be able to see the results instantaneously. It may not have the same effect as you getting to the root of the issue, um, but you'll never know, like, right? But you are at least addressing the problem at the surface level, and you'll have to wait and see. So sometimes when we use those external forces, there may be a little bit more of a waiting game. You may have to exercise a little bit more patience in the process. And you may have to make sure that you have the right material or substance or external partner or teammate that is helping you out. So I just wanted to share that kind of quick thought. It was a random conversation, a good excuse to go live with you all here on our social platforms. If you have any thoughts about uh, ways that you find yourself procrastinating, or ways that you actually allow yourself to get to the root cause of what may be preventing you from showing up the way you want to, or accomplishing the things that you are hoping to achieve, or having conversations that are important to you, let us know here in chat. Would love to hear a little bit more about what's resonating with you about this particular analogy, and I'll continue to share a little bit as I continue to unpack and unlock my experience of pulling weeds in my garden. And certainly stay tuned. I will be sharing some of my photos from Alice Faye's garden this spring and summer as well. The garden is going to have a bunch of vegetables. I might try to plant some sweet potatoes this year. So that is the one new thing that I'm going to do. But I had a bunch of strawberry plants that have grown with their runners are all over in that raised bed. So I'm looking forward to having a bunch of strawberries for my smoothies, some carrots, some turnips, some collard greens, some cabbage. Also have some tomatoes and peppers that I'm planning to plant here in a couple weeks, as well as some spinach and some onions. So we'll have a lot of fresh veggies to utilize. And so my next challenge is going to be figuring out how to find some recipes and some new recipes to try, and to have some fresh vegetables in. So I hope you all are having a good week. Hope this video may resonate with you a little bit. It's kind of random, but I'm trying to get into practice and get comfortable, to be honest with you, going live and revealing a little bit more about who I am and how I am navigating this space. If you're listening to this live, stay tuned tomorrow, May 3rd. We are launching our new season of the Unlocking the Club podcast. We have a special guest. I recorded an interview with Dr. Artika Tyner in February, right after the Super Bowl, and we had a great conversation. So stay tuned tomorrow on May 3rd. The episode 30 of the Unlocking the Club podcast will drop. The title of my conversation with Artika Tyner is Unlocking Our Ancestral Destiny. And Artika talks a lot about how her foremothers have inspired her to pursue her passion, her purpose, and to make an impact as she fulfills her destiny. So tune in. Make sure you subscribe to all of your favorite podcast platforms. Subscribe to Unlocking the Club. Follow us on social media. let us know what you're thinking and feeling, and any ideas that you have for guests on our show or ideas for us to talk about during any of these lives. Until then, thanks again for joining me, and I will see you next time. Take care.